quite sure how I qualified for this position. I've been married for over 25 years. My wife was born Jewish, and as the rabbi can attest, she speaks Armenian Yiddish. When I thought about it a little bit more, I concluded that the reason that I was selected must be because my wife was born and bred in Toronto, and I was born and bred in Vancouver. That explains the intermarriage part. As far as the conversion, she was originally a Torontonian, and after many years of perseverance, I've converted her into a Vancouverite. So those are my qualifications. But ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Chabad Lubavitch Center, I wish to welcome you all to what I believe should prove a very interesting evening on the topic of intermarriage and conversion. This forum is one of a continuing series sponsored by Chabad Lubavitch Center under the moniker of Ethics and Torah Forum. And some of you no doubt have been present at earlier forums that have tackled issues in the medical and legal fields as they pertain to Jewish life. Now, the issue of Jewish continuity is a topic that I think all of us would agree who have any Jewish affiliation is one that is foremost in our minds. Without in any way wishing to demean the horror and the brutality of the Holocaust, nevertheless, some Jewish commentators have remarked that intermarriage poses an even greater threat to the survival of Jewish people. Some would say it is ironic that in the post-World War II era, with the establishment of the State of Israel and the unprecedented ability of Jews and other ethnic minorities to gain equality generally in the Western world in their pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, that this issue should loom so large. Is this hyperbole by these commentators? Can these concerns be resolved by what some might suggest is a more enlightened method of conversion? These are some of the issues that we will hopefully be tackling this evening. Vancouver, of course, is well known as having one of the highest rates of intermarriage on the continent. Clearly, the issue of intermarriage and conversion is one that almost every family in our community has to face and deal with. And while on the one hand it presents a source of confusion and potential conflict in Jewish life, it also represents an important challenge that all of us must face. When one considers the matter of conversion, the opinions within the Jewish community go from one extreme to another. Some saying that there should be no conversions at all, and others saying whoever considers themselves to be a Jew should be treated by the community as being Jewish. Tonight we will have the opportunity of exploring these different points of view in what promises to be a stimulating, thought-provoking evening, a no-holds-barred evening. Before I introduce tonight's panelists and our special guest and keynote speaker, let me first explain to you our format. We will start off by having each of our 5 distinguished panelists having approximately 5 minutes to make a statement and question our distinguished guest, Rabbi Dr. Michael Schochet. After all of our panelists ask the questions, Rabbi Schochet will deal with these questions individually, and thereafter each panelist will have an opportunity for rebuttal or a follow-up question to Rabbi Schochet, and Rabbi Schochet will have the opportunity to respond to those questions as well. And after that, hopefully we'll have some time for the members of the audience to pose questions to any of the panelists or to Rabbi Schochet. Let me introduce our panelists tonight, and I'll do it in order of their speaking this evening. Our first panelist is Michael Levy. Michael has recently gone on a diet, and that's why it's very difficult to see him right now. He should actually be sitting there next to Dr. Angel, but if the truth be known, Michael is in Ottawa representing Station CKNW in respect of tomorrow's federal budget. Apparently he's going to be commenting on it, but we're not letting Michael off so easily and have arranged for him to participate by telephone. So you'll have the opportunity of hearing his words of wisdom even though you can't see him. A word of introduction about Michael. Michael and his family are well known in this community. He is married with 4 children, lives in the South Surrey area. He is the treasurer of the White Rock South Surrey Chamber of Commerce and a director of the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver. Michael has been involved for the past 29 years in the precious metal business and is currently a partner with his wife Carol in the Surrey White Rock Currency Exchange and is the owner of the Border Currency Exchange Corporation. I mentioned earlier that many of you are probably familiar with Michael from his appearances on CKNW Radio, where he comments on various financial issues. He appears on the Bill Good Show and has a weekly segment on the Mike Talk Show with Michael Campbell. Our other panelists, and we're sort of going from over on that side, is Tad Berger. Tad is originally from Toronto, but is a longtime resident of Richmond. He's single and is currently an undergraduate student at the Department of Agricultural Science at UBC. And after he completes his studies at UBC, Todd tells me he hopes to become an environmental engineer. He is a USY youth advisor with Beth Tikva. Our next panelist who will be speaking is Dr. Yehuda Leonard Angel. Dr. Angel is over there. Dr. Angel is from Montreal. He's resided in Vancouver for the past 30 years. He has a PhD in philosophy from UBC and currently teaches philosophy of religion at Douglas College, where he's been there for a number of years. His writings include Enlightenment East and West and a forthcoming work on the Midrash. Dr. Angel is married and has 3 children. Gloria Levy, who is on my far left over here, is originally from New York, is also a longtime resident of Vancouver. Is married, has 4 children and 10 grandchildren. She tells me that she qualifies for a minion in that regard. She has a master's degree from the University of Oregon in public administration with concentration on gerontology and the study of aging. She has had 28 years of experience as a recreation worker, coordinator of volunteers, social worker, counselor, instructor, you name it. She has authored the book Dealing with Memory Changes as You Grow Older and a series of books entitled Challenges of Later Life. Ms. Levy is currently the co-president of Or Shalom and is actively pursuing Judaic studies. Our final panelist is Andrew Berger. Andrew hails originally from Baltimore, and as most of you know, for the past couple of years, he has been the publisher of the Vancouver Jewish Bulletin. As of March 1, 1997, Andy will become the publisher of the Baltimore Jewish Times. His family has been actively involved, as some of you may know, as publishers of Jewish newspapers in the United States. And in that regard, Andy is the executive vice president of the Jewish News Group, which is a family-owned company that publishes weekly Jewish newspapers in such diverse places as Detroit, Atlanta, Palm Beach, Boca, and of course, Vancouver. Andy received an undergraduate degree from the University of Vermont and an MBA from the University of California. He has been involved in various Jewish activities in the many places that he has lived, and is currently the co-chair of the Young Adult Division of the Jewish Federation and arts and leisure leader for the Vancouver Combined Jewish Appeal, amongst his other activities. Andy is single, and I'm told that when he's not working, he enjoys skiing, mountain biking, hiking, or sea kayaking. With that level of interest, I am sure that Andy will be leaving us in March with a great deal of regret, since I'm not sure how much skiing or sea kayaking one can do in Baltimore. Finally, let me introduce to you our guest of honor, our keynote speaker. We are very fortunate tonight to have as our special guest and keynote speaker Rabbi Dr. Michael Schochet. Dr. Schochet is a resident of Toronto for the past number of years. We won't hold that against him. He has been a professor of general philosophy at Humber Community College in the Toronto area for the past 25 years. He was for a number of years professor of medical ethics at the University of Toronto and professor of philosophy and mysticism at Maimonides College. He is also the Rabbi of the Congregation Beth Joseph and Rabbi Emeritus of Keeler Congregation in Toronto. Rabbi Schochet is the author of some 25 books and numerous articles. He has lectured at universities across the world, including Oxford, Yale, University of California at Berkeley, in London, Cape Town, and McGill. He is a consultant to Jewish communities on all 5 continents and has been a frequent guest on national television and radio shows on many topics involving social issues and Judaism. Rabbi Schochet is presently on a lecture tour of the United States and Canada, where he will speak in some 30 cities, coordinated by the educational arm of the Chabad Lubavitch movement. With that said, I think we can start our evening discussion. And I believe, I'm sorry, pointed out to me, the rabbi is sort of hidden by the podium there. Do you want to stand up, Rabbi? I see. Well, he's there with Michael Levy. There's the rabbi. I think we can start this evening's activities. And I understand that Michael Levy will be, am I right about this? Michael Levy will be joining us first by telephone. And, or maybe he's not joining us first.
No, I'll join you. Are you ready for
me? We're ready for you, Michael.
Well, that's good, because if you can't see the rabbi and you can't see me, I'm not asking any questions because I'm scared. But if you can see the rabbi, I'll go ahead.
Okay, we can see him. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, when I was introduced to Chabad Lubavitch some 18 or 20 years ago, there was one thing that drew me towards what their purpose was in starting in Vancouver. And that was the fact that they were non-judgmental and non-critical. Whether you went to shul or didn't go to shul, whether you believed in a Jewish education or didn't, whether you kept kosher or didn't keep kosher, nobody ever told you you were right or wrong. So whether I was a fully observant Jew, from Orthodox to Reform, a Lubavitcher never sat in judgment. And the minute they would do that, I'm afraid I would go home. But the rabbi never asked me, do I keep Pesach? Do I keep the Sabbath? Do I go to Shul Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah? Whatever brand of Judaism my family or I wish to practice is acceptable. They will teach, they will reach out, but they will never, ever tell me I'm not a good Jew. But now, today, because my wife was born a Christian and converted under the auspices of the conservative movement, she is not Jewish in the eyes of Lubavitch, and neither are my children. So all of a sudden, the non-judgmental, when it came to me, becomes very judgmental. It's very easy to say the Torah says this, the Talmud says that, but we are now living in the 1990s. Nobody says that a Lubavitcher has to forsake his values or her values or how they practice Judaism today. But why turn somebody off just because the conversion was not done in the tight and extreme method of the Orthodoxy? Why turn somebody off who may be practicing and supporting a brand of Judaism that is much tougher to follow or observe than, let's say, Reform or Conservative, just because they did not convert in a manner deemed satisfactory to Lubavitch principles? Why not take a pragmatic approach and maybe draw even more people into the tent by not making the entry requirement so tough? Strength today is in numbers, and if somebody who has converted wants to contribute and feel they belong, why not let them, instead of saying, you are not Jewish enough for us because you did not convert the way we thought you should? Today, Madeleine Albright, the new Secretary of State in the United States, who has just found out she has Jewish parentage, is considered a Jew, whereas my wife and children aren't. I can still remember sitting in the conservative synagogue in Vancouver and bearing the wrath of a rabbi every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for being once-a-year Jews. It never failed to annoy me that somebody could sit in judgment of me and tell me the number of times I attended synagogue in a year was a mark of how observant or good a Jew I was. This never, ever happened with Lubavitch, no matter how often or rarely I showed up. I was always welcome and always made to feel a part of what was going on. Whether it was just to observe my father's yortzeit or for one morning of a Rosh Hashanah service, it was always the same. And not just for me, but for any Jew who was born a Jew or converted according to Lubavitch guidelines and principles. And that is the point, Rabbi, of my question tonight. We can and do live with this, and in fact with my family, it is not a bone of contention. That is why I can easily ask the question. But in other families, some that I know intimately, it is a bone of contention. And if you tell me and my wife and kids or other families that, quote, Torah says, or, quote, Talmud says, then you are not answering, in my mind, a 1990s question. You are not being pragmatic. And from what I've observed in the past almost 20 years of supporting Lubavitch personally in this city, is that they are pragmatists. They do change with the times. They are not an anachronism. However, in this case, learned Rabbi, they just might be. So how do you tell any Jew who has converted or who has converted and sends their kids to Cheder, financially supports the organization, that they are not accepted? And to use the same example, a Madeleine Albright, who in all her living days may never set foot inside a synagogue, never observe one Jewish holiday or celebration, never light the Shabbos candles, never hold a Seder at her house or even attend one, never give a dime to a Jewish charity, never, never, and I could go on, is a better or more accepted Jew than a convert. And how do you rationalize this, Rabbi, in 1997? And that's my opening statement in question.
Thank you, Michael. As I indicated to you earlier, our format is to carry on with the rest of our panelists, and then the Rabbi will respond to Michael's question and the other panelists as well. So I'd like at this point to call upon Tad Berger to provide his statement of question.
The topics of intermarriage and conversion are line drawing. We draw a line in the sand somewhere. We say Jew, non-Jew. But unfortunately, those aren't the only lines that I see drawn. We start drawing a lot more lines. We draw lines between the various communities, between the Orthodox community, between the conservative community, between the Reform community, between all sorts of different communities of how Jewish are you, how much do you follow a religion. We draw the line between the Shomer Shabbat Jews and non-Shomer Shabbat Jews. And we already start with such a small community that we live in, and such a small community of Jewish boys and girls. I look around trying to see who is there out there for me as a 23-year-old Jewish male, who is in our community that is dateable for me. And I see this small community of people that I've grown up with, and then I see the rest of the Jewish community, but most of them are on the other side of the line. I ask how many of the people in the Chabad Orthodox community would allow their daughter to date me. I suspect that not so many of you would feel so happy to have your daughters date somebody who follows kashrut under a conservative guideline and who keeps semi-Shomer Shabbat, but granted not perfect Shomer Shabbat. So we draw these lines and we cut our community down so small that it becomes an impossibility to not intermarry, because just marrying somebody within the religion, you start crossing these lines and you start having the interfaith within the faith. So the question is, how Jewish is Jewish enough?
Our next panelist to speak is Dr. Angel.
Honored rabbis, fellow panelists and moderators, Chabad organizers and guests, I'd like to first of all thank Chabad for putting together this symposium on this very significant topic. The Torah says, Tamim tiyeh im Hashem elokecha. You shall be pure and wholehearted with Hashem, your God. Jew and non-Jew, we strive alike for an identity which in its essence is the same for all of us, to be pure, to be wholehearted with God. But to function in a society, we also develop the notion of status, not only identity, as people who strive to find God in our hearts, but also we have boundaries and status. I want to raise a question about the status of a child born to a Jewish father and a non-Jewish mother who is raised in a Jewishly defined household. Within Reform Judaism, Reconstruction Jewish congregations, some Jewish renewal communities, which have been functioning for many years now, each in their own way, which their practitioners regard as vibrant, enthusiastic, committed, and creative, and spiritually vital. The child of a Jewish man whose mother is non-Jewish can be recognized without a conversion ceremony as Jewish when the child is raised as Jewish. There are several reasons behind these Reform, Reconstruction, and Jewish renewal organizational and community decisions to allow for patrilineal descent. The first reason is that academic historians are virtually unanimous in believing that patrilineal descent was the norm in the biblical practice period. So according to Reform, this is from within the point of view of Reform, Reconstruction, and Jewish renewal exponents, patrilineal descent as a way of including people as Jewish harkens back to the ancient part of our tradition and is not actually foreign or really new in the overall historical picture. The second reason for allowing patrilineal descent to be recognized is that it seems only fair. So the second reason comes from the principle of fairness. That if a child of a Jewish mother who is not actually raised as a Jew or given a Jewish education is recognized automatically as a Jew, then the child of a Jewish father who is raised exclusively as a Jew, with the support of the non-Jewish mother or after the divorce even or whatever, should be able to be recognized as a Jew. To do otherwise seems like a slap in the face of a nurturing Jewish father, a father who has protected the child from other influences and so on, and has given the child a Jewish education. So fairness seems to be in favor of patrilineal descent. The third reason is that it's inclusive and it's welcoming, and it encourages young people to take on the practices, rituals, and ultimately identification with a real and vibrant Jewish way of life and God consciousness. It doesn't turn people away, it invites people in. And so it conduces, as they would see it, to the development of these healthy, as they see it, healthy branches of the Jewish tradition. So what's the opposition from halakhically governed Judaism? As I understand it, the principal reason is the interpretation of a particular passage in the Torah. This is Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 through 4, particularly 3 and 4. You shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughter to his son, and you shall not take his daughter for your son, for he will cause your son to turn away from after me, and they will worship the gods of others. That's the source, as I understand it, of the principle that the child of a non-Jewish mother will be non-Jewish. Now, when you hear that passage, you'd say, well, where did it say that? It's talking about intermarriage. It does say don't intermarry, but it doesn't say that the child of a Jewish mother is a Jew and the child of a non-Jewish mother is not a Jew. So the Torah passage doesn't explicitly say this. It's derived by inference, or it's a reading through the pshat, a reading through the plain meaning to account for all the various details of the passage which you need to supply specific interpretations to in order to account for them. If I went through the logic of actually how these terms are used, and it has to do with when the terms are used in a gender-neutral sense and when they're used in a gender-specific sense, because they're given in the masculine, when they're intended to be actually gender-neutral and when they're intended to be gender-specific, that's what you have to do. But it would be a complicated logical task, and I can't do it within the 5-minute period. So the interesting fact is that within the halakhic tradition, there is nowhere that the Torah does say very clearly that a non-Jewish mother has non-Jewish offspring, obviously when the father is Jewish. Furthermore, I respectfully suggest that this passage opens itself to very many interpretations which would allow, consistent with historical details acceptable both to Orthodox and non-Orthodox interpreters, that would allow for different interpretations of what the passage is saying, including the various details of the passage, the specific extra details that you want to have drash for in order to make sense of them. So here's my question. Given the apparent acceptability of patrilineality within the biblical period, given the principle of fairness, which we like to use to guide our interpretation of Torah, given the desire for a welcoming attitude and inclusiveness, and above all, given the very real ambiguity, non-explicitness, and openness of the key source for the halakha on descent to be interpreted in different ways, and given what I hope is a desire to effect reconciliation and harmony among the various branches of Judaism, would it not now be the wise thing to do to come up with interpretations of Deuteronomy 7, verses 1 through 4, using the principles of fairness and inclusiveness and the consistency with the apparent history to interpret it in such a way as to allow for patrilineal descent?
Thank you, Dr. Angel. And then I'd now like to call upon Ms. Gloria Levy.
Well, I think we first need to analyze what we mean by membership into the Jewish peoplehood, that is, membership into the tribe. If I'm a secular Jew, born of a Jewish mother, I am de facto a member of the tribe. If I'm not converted, not born of a Jewish mother, even though I practice 80% of the rites and rituals of the Jewish religion, I'm still not a Jew. Following religious practice may be a desirable goal, but membership in the tribe is purely by bloodline, that is, born of a Jewish mother. However, one can obtain membership by conversion, which usually involves a commitment to religious practice to a much higher standard than is accepted of born Jews. In fact, one can be Jewish by birth and not even believe in God, which I find hard to understand. The double standard and racial nature of this practice leaves something to be desired. We need to find a greater congruency between identity, that is, I feel Jewish, and status, that is, membership in the tribe that's conferred by the community. However, I do recognize that in the arguments of universalism and particularity, boundaries have to be drawn. And what those boundaries should be and how to attain them is a debate for another time. But intermarriage is a symptom and symbol of the historical challenge we face living in an open and pluralistic society. For the first time in our long history, we live in a predominantly non-Jewish environment where Jews are free, relatively affluent, well-educated, and cordially welcomed as equals by the Gentile neighbors. Our children grow up in a world where Jew and non-Jew work together, study together, socialize together, and come to share common goals and aspirations. As our society becomes more egalitarian, as greater acculturation occurs to second and third generations, the incidence of mixed marriage will continue to increase. We cannot compel Jews to marry Jews, any more than we can compel Jews to be Jews. The phenomena of mixed marriage will not cease through our pronouncements. Let's stop fantasizing about the influence we do not possess and the power we do not have. While claims might be made for the strengths of orthodoxy, this movement has been the highest exporter of Jews to other movements. Historically, the great majority of those raised Orthodox have ended up identifying as conservative Reform Jews in adulthood. The following data came from the Jewish Outreach Institute newsletter in the winter of 1995. According to the authoritative 1990 National Jewish Population Survey, only approximately 22% of married adults raised as Orthodox currently identify as Orthodox. While the absolute numbers of Orthodox Jews who have intermarried is much lower than those from the Reform, the rate of increase from 1965 to 1985 is the same. It's increased 5 times. In Orthodox backgrounds, it's increased from 5% to 25%, and in Reform circles, it's increased from 12 to 65%. Clearly, we have to find new ways of looking at this phenomenon. The sociology of intermarriage is many-faceted and complex. Besides the commonalities and differences of ethnic backgrounds of the spouses, their commitments to religious beliefs and practices are significant factors in their relationship to Judaism. There are also significant differences if the Jewish spouse is male or female, and that figure is changing rapidly. It used to be predominantly Jewish men who marry Gentile wives. The stats show that it's now just about sort of 50-50, with Jewish women marrying Gentile husbands. So I'd like to look at intermarriage in 3 phases. 1, the committed Jewish partner who is married to a secular, non-religious Gentile and who's prepared to raise their children in a Jewish home and community. 2, the non-committed Jew who is married to a non-committed Gentile. And 3, the non-committed Jew who's married to a religiously committed Gentile. Now, as far as 2, the Jewish spouse who's either alienated or indifferent about Judaism and the Jewish community, and whose spouse is also indifferent about any religion, are generally the hardest to reach. Their children usually grow up secular and ignorant of their heritage. And approximately, for number 3, approximately 3% of intermarried Jews who have married a religious Christian spouse do convert to Christianity. But let's turn to number 1. Most Gentiles who marry Jews do not have strong ties to their religion at birth. I believe that the non-religious secular Gentile who is married to a committed Jew and who keeps the Jewish home, observes the holidays and life cycle events, and who give their children a Jewish education should be seen by the Jewish community as the Ger Toshav, the resident alien. In biblical times, they abided by the Noahide laws. They were not idolaters. They participated in much of Jewish life. They were more like landed immigrants, with full civil rights but not citizens. It's interesting that the one group of people Jews are commanded to love is the Ger, because we were strangers in the land of Egypt. Giving that Gentile spouse this love and respect and status may make a significant difference in the rearing of their children. You know, every Yom Kippur, we have to remember we read in the prayer book for the sin of xenophobia. We need to be forgiven. Taking time to examine our own feelings about the stranger in our midst is the first step to ensuring that we will successfully adapt to the changes in our community. It'd be a good place to start. The real question is, do we have a crisis? And what's the nature of this crisis? Traditionalists point to the relentless intermarriage statistics forecast a steep decline in the size of North American Jewish population, and more Jews producing non-Jewish children, and the figures are shocking. However, a growing number of social scientists suggest that Jews are not being lost, but they're transforming themselves into something new. There is a wealth of less noticed data in the Council of Jewish Federation's 1990 survey. The Jerusalem Report, November 5th, 92, give the following statistics. There are thousands of students in yeshivot across America. Rabbinical school enrollment for all denominations of Judaism is at an all-time high with more than 550 students. Thousands more adults are pursuing non-rabbinic Jewish studies in schools and universities and seminars. There's an explosion of growth in the Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox world, partly from the Baal Tshuva movement and partly from a high birth rate. But the non-Orthodox community has also experienced a noticeable return to tradition, and the growth in Chavurot and Jewish spiritual renewal communities and Reconstructionism is part of this renewed interest. There is continued growth in Jewish education of all forms a mushrooming of businesses such as ceremonial objects, books on Judaica, prayer books, etc. Marriage between a Jew and a non-Jew does not mean the end of Jewish commitment or Jewish loyalty. There is no guarantee that marriage by a Jew to another Jew is going to contribute anything to the survival of Judaism. In terms of Jewish continuity, there's little difference between the offspring of two secular, non-committed Jews and those of an intermarried secular couple. The key to the successful survival of Judaism is the committed, knowledgeable Jew. The heart of the matter is not intermarriage, but rather the difficulties Jews have in developing a deep Jewish commitment and living a meaningful Jewish life in the modern world. To rebuild, we need to look at ourselves honestly. The traditional punitive attitudes toward intermarriage do not work. The intermarried Jew who is committed to Judaism and the Jewish people is concerned about his or her connectedness with their offspring. We need to be more welcoming. We need to reach out and in to those families with warmth and openness and with resources such as family education programs, study groups, etc. We need to make Judaism meaningful, vital, and joyful for the whole family. So my question to you is, what welcoming programs or tools does the Jewish community offer to intermarried couples who are not converting but wish to start on a Jewish path?
Thank you. And now I'll call upon our last panelist, Andrew Berger, to provide a statement and question.
My question is, since I'm last, can I say my question was already taken? I can think I'm last because I'm allowed to say that anything outrageous that I want and then leave town next week. We're here tonight to obviously participate in the discussion of intermarriage and its causes. But let's turn our attention for the moment to not the causes but the results. And the results of intermarriage are that, as we all know statistics, that over half of the Jews in North America are intermarrying. The most frightening statistic is that over half of those intermarried couples are not raising their children Jewish. And that's the real tragedy, and that's our real crisis, is that the next generation of Jews is not raising their children Jewish. It's ironic because imagine if our Jewish children, half of them were graduating, only half of them were graduating from Jewish day schools, or only half of them were graduating from their secular high schools. There would be a revolt. Our parents would be marching into schools demanding that we change this system. Heads would certainly roll in those school systems. But what are we doing when our fellow Jews are dating, marrying, and having children with non-Jews? Do we comfort them? Do we counsel them? Do we bring them to our seders? No, our families alienate them. It's not just the rabbis and the religious leaders. It's our families, our friends, who shun us and alienate those who are dating people who are non-Jewish and marrying people who are not Jewish. And many rabbis refuse to marry these couples. And even our Jewish agencies don't let the non-Jewish spouse sit on their boards. They've become outcasts in our community. We waste so much of our valuable time, effort, and energy defining who is a Jew. I think it's ironic that Hitler didn't waste much time discussing or defining who was a Jew. If they had but one drop of Jewish blood, they were escorted to the gas chambers. But 50 years later, someone with a Jewish father can't even sit on the board of the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver. What makes Judaism so special is that it changes. It's not a static religion. Things have evolved over the years, and it needs to continue to evolve. We're facing a grave situation now, and we must welcome and embrace change among Judaism as we go forth in the 21st century. I have many friends, obviously, who have been intermarried, and one especially hit close to home. After being a good Jew for 30 years, her rabbi told her that he wouldn't marry her. One of the biggest milestones of my friend's life and her rabbi of 15 years wouldn't attend the simcha. What kind of message was that to her and her husband? Why should she want to raise her children Jewish after her teacher closed his library door on her? But luckily she did find a rabbi who would marry her and her non-Jewish husband. But he wisely placed 3 conditions upon performing the ceremony. First, there could be no non-Jewish clergy there. There couldn't be a priest or a minister. They had to attend Judaism classes together, so she would learn a bit more about Judaism, and her non-Jewish husband or fiance at the time would also learn about Judaism. And they also had to agree to raise their children Jewish. What a wise decision that this rabbi made. Now, they just, after being married for 2 years, had a little baby boy who had a bris. Their introductory to Judaism class served as a great source, a group therapy for people who were going through this same thing and felt the trials and tribulations of having to face their family and the community, and it was a great sense of support. So my question is, if Judaism is a religion of change, why can't we change the rules and allow rabbis to adopt those 3 principles as criteria for marrying Jews and their non-Jewish spouses?
Thank you, Andrew. Comes to the end of the first part of our segment, which are the questions to the rabbi. I think you'll all agree these are all very well thought out and thought-provoking questions, and I think Rabbi, you've got a mouthful to answer, so we'll call upon you now to deal with these questions.
Good evening. Vancouver is a nice city. Enjoyed myself. Hope to see you soon again. Well, where am I beginning? The original plan for this evening, the panel discussion, was that each of these 5 panelists should make a statement, ask a question, I should answer them in turn, then a little rebuttal, and a rebuttal to the rebuttal, and then on to number 2, and then on to number 3, answer 4. At first I had no objections to this, but then I was thinking about it and said it makes no sense at all. Now that we have heard all the 5 statements, it just goes to prove my point. 5 specific questions were asked. But what was ignored totally, from beginning to end, is what we are talking about. Definition of terms. You cannot ask a question out of context without first defining what context are we related to. And before I will start, I have to put out what you have in movies and television shows, viewers' discussion advice. I have quite a number of friends, I have some enemies, and I have members on both sides of the line for one and the same reason. To some I'm famous, to some I'm notorious for speaking my mind, for being blunt, for spelling out things the way they are, and not trying to camouflage and couch and hide things in whatever nice terms to make things, as was mentioned in one of the statements, popular and amenable, etc., etc. Before we can even deal with any one of these questions, again, what are we talking about? What is the issue? What is religion? What is Judaism? Before you can talk who is a Jew, what kind of conversion is acceptable, for that matter, before you can talk that there is a problem with intermarriage, I don't understand what the problem with intermarriage is. I see no problem. I have no problem with Jewish continuity. Frankly, I don't care if every single Jew on earth intermarries or converts to another religion. That's not my problem. It's not my issue. Why should I even be interested in preserving Judaism? What is it that I'm preserving? What is it that I'm trying to save? For what reason? For what purpose? We talk about Judeo-Christian values, Jewish ethics, Jewish morality. Frankly, I have not an inkling of what these words mean. There are no such things as Jewish values. There is no such thing as Jewish morality. There is no such thing as a Judeo-Christian tradition, any more than there is a Judeo-Buddhist tradition. Whatever people talk about when they discuss Jewish values, they usually come up and I ask them, what exactly do you mean? What do you have in mind? Well, you know, kindness, charity, love, etc., etc. And then you suddenly run into definitions of cardiac Judaism. What's a good Jew? One has a good heart. Gastronomic Judaism, Jewish food, soul food, etc., etc. What have these things got to do with Judaism? Gefilte fish have nothing to do with Judaism, nor does chopped liver or kishka, any more than couscous has. All depends where you come from. These are totally nothing to do with Jewish tradition, just have developed in certain countries because of external influences, etc., etc. A good heart, cardiac Judaism. And do you mean to say that goodness, kindness, love you do not find in other religions? I challenge anybody to find me one single principle of what they call Jewish values, Jewish morality, Jewish ethics that you cannot find in literally every other religion in the world as well, including those older than Judaism. So what do you mean by Jewish values? What are you trying to preserve? Jewish continuity. For what? Why do you want to save the Jewish people? Why do you want to continue this on? Why waste all that money on Jewish community centers, Jewish Federation, Jewish Child and Family Services, Jewish vocational services, for that matter, synagogues, temples, what have you? It's a real waste of money, duplication of services. Let everybody go to wherever they go. What difference does it make? Why do you have to put a Jewish label on it? On what grounds? On what foundation? What is a Jew? Some people identify Judaism, it was even mentioned, it's a bloodline. Nonsense. Sheer nonsense. Nothing to do with race or blood. If it had to do with race and blood, there would be no such thing as conversion into Judaism. You have white Jews, you have black Jews, you have red Jews, you have yellow Jews, you have green Jews, you name them, whatever they are. You've had them from literally every nation under the sun. What has this got to do with blood? What has it got to do with race? We are not a race. Every so often you have take censuses, and then they place the Jews amongst ethnic groups. Gets me upset every time. You're not an ethnic group. There's nothing ethnic about Judaism. We have Jews, like we said, from every kind, every species, every sort, and every nationality. Others try to define Judaism as a nationality. Again, nonsense. Judaism has nothing with nationality. Jewish nation is approximately 3,500, 4,000 years old. Of those 4,000 years, I don't know if we have lived for even 1,000 years in our own country. Not even a quarter of our existence. So what is nationality? Nationality is identified as a certain geographic location. What geographic location do we have? And because once upon a time we happened to live in that lousy piece of real estate called the State of Israel or the Land of Israel, no natural resources, no nothing, no this, no that, I don't know why we're so attached to it. Why do we get all read up about this, that piece? No, we want to get that piece of land. There were many Jews who indeed said, oh, we don't necessarily need that. Theodore Herzl was prepared to establish a Jewish state in Uganda. Would have avoided Amin. So if it's simply a Jewish state, a nationality, it was an attempt even to have a Jewish state in the Niagara Peninsula here last century. You're not a nationality, you're not an ethnic group, you're not a race. How could we possibly define what makes a Jew a Jew? Frankly, there's only one definition. There's only one thing and one thing alone that joins us, that connects us, and that is if we speak about the Jewish faith and the Jewish religion. Without Jewish religion, there is no Judaism. To speak about a secular Jew is an oxymoron. It's like speaking about a square circle. Literally the same. Then how can we still accept as has been mentioned by various of the questioners, secular Jews. This can be explained in one term and one term only, because the religion says so. Because the religion defines. The same as Canada defines who is a Canadian citizen. There's a Canadian law, a Canadian constitution, and it's only Canada and only the Canadian constitution that can define who can be regarded as a Canadian citizen and who can become a Canadian citizen. Without that, you cannot just come and arbitrarily move in here and decide, I have lived here for so many years, I've been following Canadian law, I've been paying Canadian taxes, etc., 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 so therefore I should be accepted as a Canadian citizen. Or any other country exactly the same way. That's blatant nonsense. Now, what does religion mean? Religion, if religion is simply a way of life, a lifestyle, then the word religion is a meaningless, nonsensical word. Because everything anybody does on earth, whether living like a Jew, or living like a Nazi, a communist, or a Democrat, it makes no difference. Everybody has his lifestyle. Everybody has his philosophy of life. So then religion, if that is synonymous with simply philosophy of life, lifestyle, the word religion is a meaningless word. It says absolutely nothing. If the word is supposed to have meaning, then it has to be distinguished from what you simply call philosophy of life. It's a unique philosophy of life. It's a unique kind of lifestyle. And the only way you can talk about religion as a unique lifestyle in a meaningful sense is if you bring in the concept of God. Without God, there is no religion. Unless, again, you go into meaningless things. Marxism, in a way, you can also look at it as a religion. I'll never forget, I was in 84, I was in Russia. And one day, standing in a hotel on the 15th floor in Riga, I looked down the street, the avenue below, and in those days, still had all over the place, all these statues to Lenin and to Marx. And I saw an old lady walking with a little child up to that statue, holding a bunch of flowers in hand, and then coming to the statue, giving the bunch of flowers to the child, and asking to put a bunch of flowers there at the foot of the statue. Religious ceremony. In communist Russia, they introduced wedding palaces with whole ceremonies to copy a certain kind of ceremony in terms of religious context to give you a certain feeling. The whole outlook of Marxism is, in a sense, a kind of a religious thing. If you take ceremony, obligations, commitments, etc., to be the definition of religion. But then again, so is hedonism. So is everything else. If religion is supposed to have meaning, you have to introduce God. And not God as some kind of, the universal idea. God is love. God is the life principle of the universe, and all this other nonsense. Either God is real, a real God, a God who is a sovereign over the universe, or you have no God. Let's not play games with words. Which unfortunately is exactly what people are doing all the time. And that's where all the problems arise from. We use words without knowing what we are talking about, without defining our terminology, without defining our context, and therefore you get confusion. To talk about God means to talk about God in a real sense. God creator, God sovereign, God in charge, divine providence, etc., and accountability to God. But even that is impossible by simply speaking about God. Philosophers throughout the ages have given all kinds of arguments to prove existence of God. And some of them are quite convincing. Some more, some less. Cosmological, ontological, teleological, each of these dividing into 5, 6, 10 different versions, etc. But even if you have proven the existence of God and you believe truly in a God, first cause, prime mover, creator, etc., you still have no religion. You can still be a deist. A deist who believes in God. God exists. God is real. God created the world. Where else did it come from? But you know what? After creating the world, God, like a little kid on the beach, creates a sandcastle, and then comes supper time, goes home, and forgets all about it. Leaves it to its own devices. Et cetera. So you believe in God. God is real. But you don't have religion. Religion means a relationship with God. Religion means that that God relates to you, God cares about you, God is a personal God, and you have to care about God. Without that, you have no religion. Regardless how you phrase it, and regardless what you do, and regardless how many ceremonies you attend, and regardless what kind of a house of worship, whatever you have, I have often wondered about some of these religions, that they come to the synagogue, the temple, or the church, or whatever it is, and they pray to whom it may concern. Like they found a tombstone in Australia, which had a crucifix, Star of David. They have the chasm of Islam. Again, to whom it may concern, whoever you are, I'm with you. That obviously is not religion. You can't have religion unless you have revelation. Without revelation, and revelation in a true, literal, meaningful sense, there is no such thing as religion. If I'm to relate to God, there's only one who can possibly tell me what kind of a relationship is possible, and what kind of a relationship is legitimate, and what kind of a relationship is meaningful. And that is God himself. Without God telling me explicitly and clearly, there is no relationship, there is no worship of God. I very often call that the fatal attraction syndrome. I'm sure you're familiar with the book or the movie Fatal Attraction. Somebody's attracted to somebody else. I see a nice, beautiful lady in the audience. I won't tell you which one it is. Which one is it? It's her. And I fall in love with her. She looks beautiful. And I want her. And I go over to her and say, look here, my dear lady. You're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my life. I've fallen in love with you. And since I've fallen in love with you, so therefore I demand that you love me back. And that we get married. Now she may very well say, thank you very much for the compliment, if she's polite. Or if she's blunt, she'll say, get lost. Either because she already has a boyfriend or a husband, or she simply doesn't care for me. But I will answer and say, I don't care what you say, and I don't care what you feel. I insist that you go for me. Why? Because I want you. And you just have to respond to my feelings and to my emotions and to my desires. Now everybody will recognize the absurdity of that. It's exactly the same with God. You can't just come to God and say, God, I love you. You are great. You are this, you are that. I want to worship you. I want to commune with you. I want to be absorbed in you. I want to have God consciousness. I want to have this religious experience. I'm going to build for you the most beautiful edifice in the world. And I'm going to practice these and those most beautiful ceremonies that are really edifying, that any human being with any common sense in their toes or wherever it is will say, wow, this is really great and inspiring. God will turn around and say, thank you very much for the compliment. But guess what? I don't care for your kind of worship. I don't care for your kind of temple. I don't care for your practices and your ceremonies. I don't care for anything that you're doing. That's not what I want. And since God is the one who is in charge, and since man-God-God-man relationship goes around the vertex of, it has to be God-centered, it's God and God alone who can define what is what and how to do things. And that is what revelation is. That God has to reveal to man exactly what he expects of him. And that revelation is again not playing games with words. You know, God speaks to me through my heart. God speaks to me through my conscience. That's rubbish. Every Nazi worked through his heart and through his conscience. I have no doubt in my mind that most of the Nazis were very sincere and conscientious in what they did. Sincerely believed that the Jew is a troublemaker, that there's a Jewish problem, and we need a solution to the Jewish problem. Every crime under the sun you can rationalize away by appealing to your conscience and to your heart and to your emotions and to your feelings. My conscience does not dictate to me the same as yours. Yours does not dictate the same to you as somebody else's. So where are your guidelines? Where's your sense of morality? Where's your sense of ethics? Philosophers have been struggling for over 2,000 years to define ethics and morality, what is right and what is wrong. And we are talking here on the human level, the mundane level. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of books have been written. Millions and millions of words have been spilled over defining morality. And there again, you have two options. Either you have absolute morality or morality is relative. To speak about relative morality is again an oxymoron, square circles. Either it is good or it is not good. Either it is right or it is not right. So where do you find criteria for something absolute? That's the problem that we struggle with. Many have tried, only to fail. And guess what? They will never find an answer. They will be writing philosophy books for the next 5,000 to 10,000 years. And I promise you now in advance, they will never come up with an answer. It is something which is logically impossible for the finite, relative human being to transcend himself or herself and come up with something which is objective and absolute. Absolute is only one thing, and that is God. And when we speak about religion, we speak about absolute values. We speak about absolute morality, absolute ethics, that certain things are right and certain things are wrong, whether you like it or you don't like it. Religion is not something that you make palatable, popular. Religion is not a democratic system. Religion is a dictatorial system. Religion is theocracy. Religion can be dictated by one and one only, and that is God. Anything that I would introduce on my own is no longer worship of God. Anything that I do to please myself or to please the crowd is no longer worship of God, but is the crudest form of idolatry imaginable. Because who are you really worshiping? Yourself. I have set my mind, my heart, my intelligence, my feelings, my emotions as the criterion and the standard as to what is right and what is wrong. Then again the question comes up, what's the difference between you and Lahafel the Nazi? He does exactly the same thing. Or go down anywhere somewhere in between the line. It's a free-for-all. As long as you sincerely believe it, as long as you have your own personal convictions. That is where Judaism speaks about the Torah. Torah is divine revelation. Torah is instruction. Telling man, es derech yelchu bo ves ha'maaseh asher yasun, the way in which to walk and the deed which to perform. God and God alone can prescribe this. All the things in the Torah which I don't like, which do not make sense to me as a 20th century, near going now to the 21st century individual, raised all my life in Western civilization, Western culture, not even going to a Jewish day school. I was raised through the whole public school system. All the things which don't make sense to me, which I have problems with, you bet there are. The same as I have problems with my digestive system. To this day, I don't know how it works. And no professor of biology and no text of biology has ever been able to explain it to me. Oh, I know what happens once I put the food in my mouth and I chew it and I swallow it and how it goes through the system. But what is going on there? Why should it work that way? Have I stopped eating since then? You look at me, the answer is obvious. As I said, I'm going to diet as well. There are many things in life that we don't know, and there are many things in life which we will never know. The most crucial questions in life are unanswerable questions. The only thing, the difference then is, that in certain things, A, because practicality mandates to me, I have no choice, I have to eat, otherwise you can't even ask a question. And where I know that certain things come from a certain source, it in effect becomes really irrelevant. There isn't a doctor on earth who can describe to me and explain to me why he prescribes a certain medication. Doctor doesn't exist. All he can do is say, look here, through trial and error, by fluke of accident, we discovered this and that this chemical has this and that effect on your body. That's it. Why? For that matter, even for me to ask the doctor why you prescribe that medication for me is also absurd. Some people insist on doing that. Well, if he answers you simply, look here, because that is what the medical text shows here, there, and that, and what the experiments have done, that's fine. But if you want more than that, if I would be the doctor, I would kick you out of the office. You want to know why? You go for 6 years to medical school, and you pay the tuition fees, and studies all these texts, then you will know why. Don't ask me to explain to you while standing on one foot what took me 6 years to learn. In religion, there are many things which we do not understand. In religion, there are many things which may not make sense to us. In religion, there are many things which may go right counter to everything that we would like to be in a certain way. But that's exactly what religion is about. That's exactly what ethics and morality is all about. If you simply follow your intuitions and inclinations, then where's the challenge? Where do you prove yourself? Where are you forming yourself, shaping yourself? Where are you living up to certain moral obligations? The struggle between what we would like to do and what we ought to do, that is the very essence and substance of what life is all about, and certainly what religion is all about. If therefore we now have a religious code defining and specifying for us what's what, how to do it, I'm stuck with it. Whether I like to follow it or do not like to follow it, for that I have freedom of choice. That's again the essence of human reality. Without freedom of choice, the Torah revelation would make no sense at all. And it's through this freedom of choice that I prove who I am and what I am. But the freedom of choice is basically to either follow God, follow revelation, have a relationship with God, or do your own thing. These are the only two alternatives. So, in a nutshell, when we talk about Jewishness, Jewish identity, if you do not base that on this criterion, on this standard, you really, honestly, have nothing to talk about. Why indeed should any Jew on earth care about his Jewishness? Why should any Jew on earth worry about Jewish continuity? For what? Self-preservation? That's another ego trip. Because Jewish is beautiful? So you eat Jewish soul food, you want to keep certain Jewish traditions because my Zaidi and Jan Zaidi did so and so? Fine. If it turns you on, you like your chicken soup with knedlach, you like your children with the kishke, gesundheit. If you enjoy it, go ahead and eat it. But don't make that obligatory. Don't try to impose these values upon your children and grandchildren. If they should like it, if it tickles their taste buds, good luck to them. If it doesn't, it really makes no difference. Does it make any difference whether you still wear the garments that your ancestors wore 500 years ago? In some countries, they have these national guards, and comes to national, special national days, or national holidays, they'll put them on and have dances and performances in them and so forth. It gives them roots. It gives them a certain sense with history, sense with identity. But that's if I feel, if I'm looking for that. What if I'm not looking for that? Why should you care whether I care or not? What is it gain to you or to anybody else? Isn't it interesting that Jewish federations all of a sudden have become obsessed about Jewish continuity? For years they couldn't care less about Jewish education. In most places it was a big struggle to get communal funding for the Jewish schools. Now all of a sudden there is an obsession. For the past so many years, every federation, a general meeting and a hard assembly, it's the hot topic, prime topic. Why? Let's be blunt. There's one answer for that. Sorry, three answers. Money, money, money. Because as you have intermarriage, as you have assimilation, as you have all these people falling away, the source of funding is drying up. As these people assimilate and get absorbed in the general community, why should I support the JCC if I can support the Red Cross, or the Cancer Society, or the zoo, or the museum? What difference does it make? This is a communal need and that is a communal need. So all of a sudden they see, yes, something, and those who are honest will admit that, and have admitted it. That is where the crunch really started coming in. But the problem was a problem before as well. And then why should it worry about it? Again, why preserve these so-called Jewish institutions? What makes them Jewish for that matter? Because they have the name Jew on it? When you talk about intermarriage, again, I asked the question I asked earlier. Why care? What difference does it make? The only reasonable objection that anybody can have to intermarriage is purely one of religion. Take away religion, take away a dictate, a prohibition of Torah, a prohibition of revelation, you have absolutely no grounds to object to intermarriage. What do you care who they fall in love with? What do you care who they live with? What do you care what kind of lifestyle they lead? What is it your business? And especially, as was mentioned, we live in this open society in which we intermingle in business, socially, and everything else. So let's intermingle in everything, the big melting pot. Wouldn't that solve practically all social problems that we have? It's only when you try to say, oh no, I'm Jewish. What do you mean you're Jewish? Well, you know, my dad was a Jew, or my mom was a Jew, or my grandparents were Jewish. The only objection one can have to intermarriage is one of religion. And once you get into religion, then you have to ask yourself a very hard question. What is it that my religion says about it? That is not only what your religion says about it in terms of the objection to it, but also in terms of how do you relate to it. The code of Jewish law, the Torah, does not just simply say, Lo yischat and bon, do not intermarry with them. There's a whole list of details then, what happens if such things do happen. You can't take the one without the other. Otherwise you're playing games, picking and choosing whatever you like, whatever suits you. Meaning you're setting your own criteria. Then they ask for conversion. What is conversion? Conversion is not changing religion the way you change a dress. You trade in your old car for a new car. Conversion is not a la Hollywood. Today I marry a Jew, I become Jewish. Tomorrow I marry a Buddhist, I become a Buddhist. The day after I marry a Catholic, I become a Catholic. Anything just to keep the mother-in-law happy. That's a betrayal, not just of religion, it's a betrayal of truth, of honesty, of decency. I've had plenty of times young couples coming to me asking to convert the non-Jewish party. You know what my response was? Please do me a favor. Go get married in the church with my blessing. Don't ask me to convert you. Because if you ask me to convert you, you are asking me to make a mockery of religion, to make a mockery of truth, to make a mockery of Judaism, to make a mockery of everything that I believe and everything I stand for. You want to do something? Go ahead, do it on your own. But don't ask me to be an accessory to it. It's a mockery. People have been after us, missionaries, for years. They came with the cross in one hand and the sword in the other hand. And said to us, either you kiss this or this kisses you. They did not succeed. So they tried other things. And incidentally, just incidentally since I already touched upon that, once you get into conversion, once you get into intermarriage, once you get into anything to preserve Jewish identity, would you accept the Jews for Jay? Or the so-called Messianic Jews? Would you say that if somebody marries with them, it's as long as the married is a Jew, but right, it's all the same. Where do you draw the line? If anything within the Jewish community or the Jewish family counts as a legitimate expression of Judaism, for as long as you identify as a Jew, then you should accept the Jews for Jay. The Hebrew Christians, the so-called Messianic Jews, they identify as Jews. And they're much more religiously observant about Torah and mitzvot than, as you say, most other Jews. They make an extra point to do so. If you're not prepared to do that, then why accept this expression, or that argument, or that claim, because after all, it's all within the family. And just accept them. They mean well. So do they. and they may even mean more well than some of those that all of us accept. They tell a story that since they saw that all these conversion bits did not work, in Poland there were some priests who hit upon a new idea. Jews are poor. Let's buy their souls. Let's offer them a fee. You convert, you get a certain amount of money. Well, it was this fellow who saw, hey, it's a new way of making a living, going from one parish to the next. He came to one priest, and he told him, okay, I'll convert you, but remember, you have to, it is not a game that we play, you better toe the line. And that was in the good old days when there was no meat on Fridays. So he says, sure, no problem. Takes him to church, sprints some holy water on him, gives him his check, that's it. Now that priest was no fool. The next Friday night he makes a spot check. Here he goes, sneaks up to the house of the Jew, looks through the window. Friday night. What happens to you on Friday night? How can you survive Friday night without Mr. Olsen, without having your chicken soup and before the fish? It's impossible. Looks through the window and he sees he's sitting there with a Shabbos table. He runs in, screaming his head off. I told you no meat on Fridays! His new convert says, Father, what are you talking about? Meat, what are you talking about? There's any meat here. Right there, chicken counts as meat. Chicken? Where? There, the plate. That's not chicken, that's fish. He says, are you crazy? You think I'm crazy? This is chicken. No, Father, I'm telling you, it's fish. Since when do fish have legs? Since when do fish have wings? Oh, that's your problem. You don't understand, Father. Remember last week I came to your church? I converted to Christianity. You took some holy water, you sprinkled it on me, you said, now you're no longer a Jew, now you're a good Christian. Tonight before I sat down to dinner, I took some holy water, sprinkled it on the chicken and said, now you're no longer a chicken, now you're a good fish. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what 90% of the conversions are all about. Sprinkling holy water on the chicken and saying, now you're no longer a chicken, now you're a fish. That's not what conversion is. Conversion is not going to the mikveh. Conversion is not circumcision. These are incidental. These are after the conversion has already taken place. What conversion is something in here. That's where conversion takes place. When you adopt a religion, you don't just adopt another experiment. Religion to the religious person means literally everything in his life and more than his life. The proof you have that in every religion without exception, you have a history of martyrs. That then confronted with the challenge, forsake your beliefs, forsake your faith, or forsake your life, they would lay down their life. Life, big deal. 70, 80, 120 years. What are you losing? Sooner or later we all have to go. And they say the other side is much better than this one. But the other side is eternity, is salvation, is soul. To save another couple of years here on this world, to sacrifice my soul for that, and no religion will they accept that. So not only in Judaism do you have the martyrs, you have them in Christianity, you have them in Islam, you have them in Hinduism, you have them in every religion. Because the truly religious person truly believes that his faith stands higher and beyond everything and anything else. It is the most precious thing in the world. It relates to his real being, his soul, his spiritual survival. And that is what conversion is. When you convert, this means I now recognize in that faith, in that religion, ultimate truth, absolute truth. And I adopt it because this is what I want to accept. This is the only way that I can see, that I can live, that I can have peace with my own mind, with my own intelligence, with my own heart. If you don't feel that, there is no conversion. It's a sham ceremony. It's fake. Pure fake. And here there is no compromise. You're compromising truth. You're compromising ethics. You're compromising integrity. Not even talking religion here. You're talking here basic truth, basic decency, basic integrity. Once Once you have the conversion in your heart, and you mean it, then I say, okay, let's go to the mikveh. Okay, let's have a circumcision. Before that, it's meaningless, it's worthless. Just going through the motions. It's a circus. It's the very opposite of everything and anything that religion and ethics and morality stand for. Once you take it now in this context, and this is obviously the background of in which we are meeting here, in which all these questions come up. Religion is not something, regardless how much you would like, that I can simply adapt as I like. Yes, 20th century, the 1990s. These things are outdated. Guess what? These things were outdated in the days of Abraham. These things were outdated in the days of Moses. These things were outdated in the time of the temple. These things were outdated when the temple was destroyed. These things have been outdated every year for the past 3,500 years. And for 3,500 years we have been challenged. You are living in the past. You're an anachronism. You're crazy. If we had listened, nobody would be sitting here tonight asking me any questions. Echad Avram. This is what Judaism was all about. Abraham was one single individual against the whole world. People in the questions and the statements talked about numbers. Guess what? The same passage in the Torah that speaks about intermarriage is the one that tells us that Lo merubchem mikol amin is not because you are a great nation of so many people that I have chosen you. Ki atem ha'me'at mikol amin. You're one of the smallest nations in the world. People play numbers games. You need numbers. That's how you get numbers. That's how you lose numbers. If we had played the numbers game, we wouldn't be around anymore. And it's in spite of the numbers game that we are around. If people are looking for miracles today, miracles to prove the truth of the Torah, greater than any of the miracles described in the Bible, you can see them today, right here in this room if you want. Just take a mirror and look into the mirror, and you see the greatest miracle of them all, transcending any miracle in the Bible. That on this February the 17th, 1997, in that God-forsaken town, Vancouver, British Columbia, people get together to talk about intermarriage. Jews get together, identify as Jews, worry about their Jewishness, worry about the Jewishness of their children. Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. That's been the Babylonian Empire, the Assyrian Empire, the Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, Egyptian Empire, Roman Empire, Third Reich. All of them. Where are they? Little footnotes in the history book. And those darn Jews, Hama'at Mikol Amin, one of the smallest of all the nations, are not just being small in number, but being continuously persecuted, being continuously slaughtered and murdered, being continuously assaulted by all the alien cultures. Guess what? That stiff-necked nation is still around. You can't get rid of them, regardless how much you try. Is that because we called meetings and conferences and panel discussions what to do about intermarriage and assimilation? No. That's not why we are here. Why are we here? I don't know. I have only one explanation. Ask him upstairs. Without that, we would not be here. It defies every law of nature, every law of history, every law of sociology, every law that you can possibly think of. This is the context. Once you are in this context, obviously then all the questions have already been asked, have already been answered. But I'll deal with some of them, the specifics anyway. Look, we talked about conversion. The first question, first panelist, talked about what is called why should we bother about legitimate conversions, and why his non-Orthodox conversion is not accepted by the Orthodox. Why has Lubavitch suddenly become judgmental about his wife, etc., etc. Isn't she better or more real a Jew than so many of these others, etc., etc. Frankly, I did not set the rules. Nor can I set the rules. As we said before, either we talk about Judaism, religion, God, revelation, or we don't. Once you drop revelation, game is over. There's nothing further to discuss. Then do anything you like. I have no objection to it. Why should there be distinctions in different movements? And why should one movement not accept the conversions or the religious acts of another movement? Exactly the same reason. What are your rules? Can any Tom, Dick, and Harry come up any time, whether it's 19th century or 20th century, and decide, you know, I want to have a different perception, a different practice of Judaism? You're entitled to do what you like. But you cannot now come, Johnny come lately, and say, this is what I regard as acceptable Judaism. For me, to accept any non-Orthodox movement would be to deny myself. I would have to call myself a liar, a cheat, a hypocrite. Either I believe in the truth of the Torah, or I do not believe in the truth of the Torah. I was once in a panel discussion in Australia about 2-3 years ago. And the Reform Rabbi was on the panel, and he asked me, Tommy, why do you not accept me as a rabbi? Why do you not accept me as your equal? And my answer to him was, for exactly the same reason that you do not accept me as a rabbi, or as your equal. He says, but I do. I said, oh no, you don't. And why do I say you don't? Because if you honestly regard me as a rabbi, meaning as an authority on Jewish law, then you would have to accept what I say about Jewish law. But obviously you don't. You claim that your denial of Torah min ha-shamayim, of divine revelation, in the literal sense, and without the literal sense, again you're talking about loose terms hanging up in the clouds somewhere. And you believe that you can do all these things, including, as was mentioned earlier, about patrilineal descent, which we'll get into still. Then obviously you do not accept my interpretation, or my tradition, or my beliefs. And there is no way in the world that you can. You cannot accept me without denying yourself. What you can do is you can say, well, okay, his criteria are more strict than mine, so they cover mine. If 10 is good, 100 is even better. So fine, so he can accept my form of conversion. But if 100 is necessary, according to me, then 10 is not good enough. So there's no way. I cannot possibly, no believer in Torah min ha-shamayim can possibly accept the legitimacy or the authenticity of any interpretation or any application of anything that would deny this most fundamental principle of all principles of Judaism. The most fundamental principle of all principles of religious conviction, not just Judaism. So there is not a question why I'm not being judgmental. Not being judgmental at all. I'm simply telling you, look here. You come to me as a Jew. For me, the Torah defines who is a Jew. The Torah tells me if you're born of a Jewish mother, like it or not, it's a Jew. You can be a Jewish atheist, a Jewish secularist, a Jewish this and that and that. Too bad. You're born in Canada, whether you like it or not, you're a Canadian citizen. That gives you automatic citizenship. When you abide by the laws of Canada, you do not abide by the laws of Canada, that's it. Canada is stuck with you. If you're not born here, then you have to go through a naturalization process. People born in Canada do not have to study anything about Canadian history, about Canadian law, about the Canadian Constitution. Nothing. It's enough, you're born here. Finish, mazel tov. You're Canadian. If you come from outside, they suddenly demand of you. First, you have to live here so many years. Then you have to make sure that you know something about what Canada is all about. Then you have to pledge allegiance to abide by the laws of Canada. Nobody born here has ever sworn allegiance to abide by the laws of Canada. If you're a naturalized citizen, you want to become a naturalized citizen, you do have to. And guess what? If you don't, you can get kicked out. Canada cannot kick out somebody born here. Is it fair? Well, like one of Canada says, you have to draw the line somewhere. And here we are talking about man-made laws. Here we are talking about laws and a constitution made by us that has been changed by us in the course of time and can still be changed by us in the course of time. It's within our control. We make it, we change it. When we talk about religion, you talk about Torah, you're not talking about laws which I make. You're talking about divine revelation. There's only one who can change that. If anybody else could change it, what the heck are you guys doing being Jews? You should have become Christians a long time ago. Why do we reject Christianity? Why do we reject Islam? They believe in the Old Testament, but they believe, yes, a change can come about. You have to adapt. New Testament. And it's not the Jew who is one in the flesh, but in the heart, in the soul. Christianity from day one calls itself the New Israel. Every Christian regards himself as a Jew. The true Jew. Are you prepared to accept that? If not, why would you prepare to accept all these other heterodox movements and ideologies? What's the difference? Where is the difference? Absolutely none. Logically, absolutely none. Zero. Zilch. So it's not a question of being judgmental. If I have an identity, if I speak about Jewishness, who is a Jew, what is a Jew, I'm stuck with that definition. And if somebody, for whatever reasons, cannot live up to that, then too bad. The traditional historical criteria, pre-19th century, when these new movements were founded and invented, are universally accepted. Nobody has any problems with them. You have a problem with the basic ideology. Well, then spell it out. You make your own religion, you have your own revelation, you have your own Bible, you have your own criteria for what you call Jewish or religious and so forth, but then don't come to me and ask me that I accept it. What you want to do in your house, it's your problem. But don't come and ask that I should legitimize and authenticate that which you have chosen to do for yourself. In the second one, how Jewish is Jewish enough? Each one has a sense of values. Well, in a way, we have already answered that. Sure, each one has a sense of values. Every single person on earth. But just because each one has his or her own sense of values does not mean that they are values. When we talk about values, we talk about ethics, we talk about morality, we want to know what is authentically good, what is authentically right. Not just what you feel and what turns you on and what gives you a sense of fulfillment, of self-realization. The question came in, I remember now the context. You asked about dating. That some Orthodox people would not want you to date their daughter. Well, first of all, I don't know if that is necessarily true. Secondly, even in those cases where it is true, the same as parents have certain value systems for their offspring, how they raise their family, and the values that they imbue into their children, and how they want their children to continue their tradition. For the same reason that you all sit here tonight and have this panel here tonight talking about how you want your children to marry Jews. For the same reason, people have their own values. We want to continue this in this particular tradition. If you are prepared to change your lifestyle and introduce a lifestyle that will abide by halacha and by the standards which that family has adopted for itself, no problem. I really think it's an unfair question to say they just have to accept me as I am. You're not accepting them as they are. You're telling them that you are not accepting my values, you're no good. But if you are allowed to do that to them, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. They have their values and they say it back to you. Then we come to the patrilineal descent. With all due respect, I think it's absolute nonsense to say that that is normative historical to Jewish tradition. There's not a single source anywhere that would even indicate that. The confusion comes in from the ignorance of the papers that I've seen written by them, and I've studied the whole proposal that they have. It's because in the Torah you usually talk about according to the house of the fathers. Tribal affiliation, inheritance, goes strictly patrilineal. religious affiliation is strictly matrilineal. No time, at no time throughout history, will you ever find, not even in the reform movement until the 1980s, not even the radical reformers in Germany in the 19th century, ever dreamt about suggesting patrilineal descent. This is an invention which was initiated by Alexander Schindler, and later, finally, it was even rejected by the Reform Conventions until it was finally accepted after several attempts. And now, of course, they want to backtrack. Oh no, of course, this is good ancient Jewish tradition. Because after all, saw the arguments, Abraham married Sarah. That's the argument which I saw himself. That's the major paper on that. Isaac married Rebecca. Moses married Zipporah. Obviously, they married Gentile women, and the children obviously were Jewish. I've never seen a more ridiculous argument in my life. Since Abraham was a Jew, and he married Sarah, so obviously patrilineal descent. Who says Abraham was a Jew? Number one, who says Abraham was a Jew? When did Judaism begin? According to Halacha, Abraham was not a Jew. That's number one. According to Halacha, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they had a law of Noachites. Jew qua Jew begins with the giving of the Torah. That's the foundation of the Jewish nation. There are other halachic authorities who argue this and say, no, Abraham regarded as the first Jew. What made Abraham a Jew? What turned Abraham into a Jew? How did he become a Jew? Simple question. Well, obviously he accepted God, he must have done something. Well, if Abraham became a Jew, whichever way he became a Jew, why did not Sarah become a Jew as the way Abraham became a Jew? Where do you get it? Just because he married us, and therefore obviously it's patrilineal descent. Moses married Zipporah, the daughter of a priest of Midian. Obviously he married a Gentile girl. And how do you know there was no conversion? Whatever conversion meant in those days. So there's this sheer absurdity where they literally go splitting hairs, they talk about Talmudic, pilpulistic hair splitting, and then they invent their own without any foundation, without any source whatsoever, anywhere in tradition or in simple logic, in simple common sense logic. At no time throughout Jewish history has that ever been suggested. And then they want to come now, Johnny come lately, in the year 1980, whatever year it was, and they adopted that, and say, well, this has been traditional Jewish perception, which for some reason or another at a certain time in history later was changed. Show me when it was changed, show me who changed it, show me that it ever was practiced beforehand. Likewise was the question, how come that this idea of that the child of the Gentile mother is regarded as a Gentile, and the child of the Jewish mother would be regarded as a Jew, regardless of what the father is. It's not stated explicitly. Yes, you're 100% right, it's not stated explicitly. To answer that, I would ask you, can you find me anything that is stated explicitly in the Torah? Circumcision. Is that mentioned in the Torah anywhere? It is, sure it is. Does it tell you what circumcision is? I challenge anybody to tell me what the definition of circumcision is. All the Torah says, cut off the foreskin. Foreskin of what? Tip of my nose, my ear, my fingers. There's absolutely no source anywhere in the Torah as to what the definition of circumcision is. The oldest so-called Jewish practice, most fundamental, which even the most irreligious person still observes. Shabbat. Do you have anywhere in the Torah definition of what working on Shabbat is? Tefillin. Do you have anywhere in the Torah any word about tefillin? Bind it for a sign upon your hand and for a sign between your eyes. Bind what? Bind where? Bind how? Not a word about it. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. Tzitzis. You wear a talis. Pedashal. Put fringes upon the corners of your garment. What fringes? How many fringes? What kind of fringes? Which kind of garment? Name me one mitzvah in the Torah that the Torah gives you explicit instructions as to what it means. Not one. Dietary laws. All the most fundamental principles that you have in Judaism. Fasting on Yom Kippur. Blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Show me a source for that in the Torah. Does not exist. Shechita. Kosher slaughter of animals. That's a real One. All it says in Torah, and you shall shecht the animal as I have commanded you. Check from Genesis 1:1 all the way to the end of the Bible, not one reference as to how you have been commanded, what you have been commanded, where you have been commanded. This is what Judaism means by the oral tradition. That oral tradition is as old as the written tradition. Without an oral tradition, the written tradition is a totally mumbo-jumbo, meaningless joke book. And it's not even funny. It has nothing to say. Not a single sentence in the Torah makes any sense without the oral tradition. So then to ask the question, how come that is not explicit? How come that is not so clear? Why don't you ask it about everything else in Judaism? Literally everything else. Including the most fundamental principles from A to Z. Next one. Secular versus proving yourselves. Well, in a way I already answered that. If you're born a Jew, you're stuck with it. You're born here. Some countries, I don't know if it's still today, but certainly in recent times, I remember even in the United States and Canada, these warnings in the passports that if you're born in a certain country and you have renounced their citizenship and you have adopted American citizenship or Canadian citizenship, be careful to go back to your country because they may not recognize your renunciation. They may still regard you as their natural citizens. That's exactly how Judaism looks at it. You're born a Jew, you're going to die a Jew. You can stand on your head and convert 10 times over. Nothing is going to change, nothing is going to help you. Why would I accept him as a Jew and somebody else not? Well, like we talked about earlier, what is citizenship? The Torah defines how you become a citizen in Judaism. That's it. I did not set the rules. Do they make sense to me? Offhand, it would seem that it was a legitimate question. Here, a person doesn't believe in anything, doesn't do anything, etc., 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 and there a person, all of a sudden, from them you demand everything. Like that mother whose daughter fell in love with an Italian boy and find him answering conversion. She woke him up every morning to go to Shul Dam. And he goes faithfully every morning to Shul Dam. Doesn't mind, but after a while he notices something strange. Says, me, you wake up. Your own son, you don't wake up. Yeah, he has nothing to prove. You have something to prove. Why is it that way? Take it up as the boss. Take it up as the author. But that's the way it is. But what disturbs me even more is when they talk about these committed Jewish partners. There's something basically wrong there. What do you mean, committed Jewish partner? When he goes out and he marries a non-Jewish girl or a non-Jewish man. Where is the commitment? What does the word commitment mean? That he wears the Star of David? King size? What does that mean? Committed means that you're committed to your tradition. And if you know that your tradition tells you this is a no-no, then you will just have to transcend the feelings and the desires and the passions of your heart. Is it hard? Yes, it is hard. So is an amputation. But that's an oxymoron to talk about the committed Jewish partner in a case of intermarriage. That's sheer nonsense. That is a person who wants to have the cake and eat it at the same time. For whatever reason wants to keep identifying with Jewish roots, for whatever reasons, whether emotionally or this or that, but at the same time wants to do his own thing. You can't have it both ways. Factually, you have it both ways. Factually, you are a Jew, regardless what you do. But philosophically, logically, it's an oxymoron. It's a contradiction in terms. Does it happen? Yes, it happens. And it's happened with fine and nice Jews. Then we get to the statistics. I always love statistics. You tell me what kind of an argument you want, I'll always have statistics for you. And if tomorrow I have to speak somewhere else and have to defend the other side, I'll bring the statistics for that as well. The greatest move out, it was said, to other movements is from orthodoxy. Well, obviously. Originally, there was only orthodoxy. And then you get new movements. Where else are they going to get their recruits from? That's number one. Number two, even if it's not taken in that sense, what do they mean from orthodoxy? Lots of people call themselves Orthodox Jews, or they are identified as Orthodox Jews. How and why? Simple reason. What is this simple demographic way of determining who is Orthodox, who is Reform, who is Conservative? Go to the synagogues, take the membership lists. For my own congregation that I've been in Toronto for over 30 years, I would say half the members, dues-paying members, were also members in the Reform Temple, were also members in Conservative, who kept their membership for purely sentimental reasons. The Zaydis Zaydi was in that shul, they wanted to keep it up. There are people in Orthodox shuls, if you were to look at their level of observance, their lifestyle, it is far, far, far from what you would normatively should, or what you normally should identify as Orthodox. Membership in a shul does not give you the affiliation of where the person stands. And if children therefore grow up in a household where they see, hey, mom and dad, sure, for a Shoshana Yom Kippur they go to that place, they go to that shul. The rest of the year they don't go. And for that, yes, at home we have kosher style, but when we go out, of course, different ball game. Do they feel any affiliation? Do they feel any commitment? Do they have any reasons to go here and there? I've been involved in fighting cults for the past 30 odd years. And when Jewish parents have problems, I keep getting them literally all over the place. One day in Toronto I had an interesting call. Father calls me up. His son is involved with an Eastern group and is on his way to go to India to follow his guru. Could I talk to him, do something about it? Okay. What can you tell me about your son? First of all, how old is he? 27. 27, because his daddy doesn't want him to go to school. So I said, okay, tell me something about him. What's his background? What's his Jewish background? If I talk to somebody, I need something to tackle, something to attach myself to that I can work on. Well, we belong to this and that temple. We always go there once and sometimes twice a year. So fine. And your son also went? No, frankly, he didn't go. We took him when he was 5 years old, and he didn't like it. So we didn't want him to get turned off. So we never took him again. It's not made up. We didn't want him to get turned off by Judaism, so we did not force him, we did not take him again. So since then he hasn't gone. My goodness. So I said, okay, this angle is out. What's your relationship with your son? Oh, you're very close. Oh, gosh, something to talk about. So I said, then I can tackle him, look what you're doing to your father, even though non-religious and all that. And so he's zeroing on that, on the emotional level. So he says, no, please don't. Why not? He says, because I may lose him then. He may possibly say, I don't care what my father thinks. As if he had. I said, my goodness, what then am I going to talk to him about? Am I going to try and convince him why he should not go there? So he says, can't you tell him that the mysticism that he finds there in those Eastern groups, he can find the same in Judaism? I said, sure, I could tell him. But I won't. I would be a hypocrite and a fake if I were to tell him that. Why? Because if I were your son, and he has a little ounce of intelligence in him, you know what I would answer to that? Say, well, mazel tov. So Judaism has it also. So what's the difference whether I take it here or I take it there? It's the same thing. All rivers lead to the same ocean. That's not an argument. We have it also. Again, what we said earlier about Jewish values. So then I said, let me tackle the angle about the relationship with his parents. He says, no, I have to think about it. Okay, call me back. He never called back. That's Jewish commitment. On the one hand, there's an absurdity there. On the other hand, I'm very happy about it. Even those people who are concerned about intermarriage. Logically, they have no reason to be concerned about it. Logically, they have no reason to be upset about it. They should simply shrug their shoulders and say, who cares? What difference does it make? Thank God that they do. And that they do care about it not because of themselves, but in spite of themselves. According to their lifestyle, according to the upbringing that they gave to their children, they should not expect any different. A woman once came to a great sage and told him a problem. She asked his son. After listening to all her problems, he asked, how old is your son? 12 years. So he answered, I'm afraid you came to me 12 years and 9 months too late. We worry about education, Jewish education. We have to make a bar mitzvah. I don't know why they use such a big word, because it's mostly bar, nothing to do with mitzvah. So all of a sudden they have to send him to a teacher so he can perform nice performance in front of the congregation. And then everybody wishes mazel tov. And now with his bar mitzvah, he has graduated not into Judaism but out of Judaism. He's finished. He's now a mature adult. He can do his own thing. That's not where Jewish education begins. Jewish education does not begin even when you send him to Cheder at 6 years old, 7 years old. Jewish education does not even begin at age 3 when the child starts talking about it. Jewish education starts 9 months before conception. 9 months before birth, before conception. That's when you have to ask yourself, what kind of a household, what kind of Jewish identity do I want? What is it that I want to perpetuate? Thank God, most of us are not that logical. And that's why most people, regardless how far removed, are upset. And should be upset. And that is why, as in the first question, Lubavitch is not judgmental. That's not Lubavitch again. It's not Chabad. That's Torah again. The time of the Baal Shem Tov, right after the Shabsai Tzvi movement, there was the Frankist movement. The Baal Shem Tov himself was involved in battling them, debating them. When they lost the debate, they converted to Catholicism. Many people were happy. The Baal Shem cried his heart out. He rent his garments and he shortened his life. And he exclaimed the following: for as long as a limb is still attached to the body, it can heal. Once it's severed from the body, that's it. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. I don't care what party affiliation you have, what temple or non-temple that you belong to. We are all one body. Whether I like you or I don't like you, friends you can choose, family you're stuck with. And we are family. To deny the identity of any one Jew is to deny your own identity. To cut off any one Jew is to cut off literally a limb from your body. It's not just that individual that's involved, the whole nation is involved. The whole nation suffers, and the whole nation is in pain. Whether we realize it or we do not realize it. That is at the foundation of being non-judgmental. And being non-judgmental, let's not use that term so lightly either. Non-judgmental has different meanings. I'm not going to stand here and condemn you, which does not mean that I condone what you're doing. And when the right moment comes up, I have an obligation to tell you what you're doing wrong. And if I don't do so, then I am failing, and again denying myself. But just to sit here, because this moves now from a theological question, from a philosophical question, to a practical question. And that will deal also then with the last question that was asked. There's a practical problem. You can sit here, yes, and philosophize and say, you here, this, I can lay you down the rules, this is what it is, this is the definition, these are the criteria, these are the standards, and too bad. Obviously, it doesn't work that way. Once upon a time, it could have worked that way. If you were in the shtetl, there was certain autonomous Jewish communities, you had control over that, then yes, it worked. And there were cases that it didn't work, but that's just too bad. The same as it doesn't work with other problems in society. Today we are not dealing with heretics. Today we are not dealing with apostates. A fellow once came to a rabbi and says, Rabbi, I'm an apikoros. There is a heretic. The rabbi looks at him and says, sorry my friend, you're not an apikoros. You're just plain, simply an ignoramus. To be a heretic, that's an honorary title. To be a heretic, to be an apikoros, you need a PhD in Jewish studies. And not the Jewish studies, the joke that you get at universities, which have led so many Jews and Jewish students astray from Judaism and did not make them educated Jews. And I speak from experience. I'm involved in academic life for over 25 years. They get all kinds of substitute, crazy inventions of so-called scholarship, academic scholarship, which has nothing to do with what Judaism is all about. Nothing whatsoever. Sure, they can quote texts, chapter and verse, but they have not the inkling of an idea what these texts are really all about. What is the real message about it? To be an apikoros means you first have to know what is going on, what the texts say, what is the meaning of it, and then willfully deny it. Today, I can state categorically, it does not exist. There's not a single apikoros alive nowadays. Not a single apikoros. Lots of ignoramuses. Lots of them. But not a single apikoros. In halacha, this is called the tinuk shnishlo beino hakum. Children who have been raised in an environment where they simply don't know who they are, what they are. And halacha says here, you have no right to push them away. You have an obligation to be mekaf and bring them close. Educate them. And obviously you can't throw the book at them all in one shot. You'll knock them unconscious. Deal with each one, with each individual at his level. If anybody came here tonight expecting answers to the problem, forget it. There are no answers. There is no one magic answer. If there had been a magic answer, the problem would not have existed already for some years. Each case is an individual case. In some cases, yes, you have to be strict. In some cases, you have to throw the line. And in many of those, it will work. Some it doesn't. In other cases, throwing the book of the law, it's not going to help one another. They don't even know what you're talking about. The same as I started off with discussing the whole context. If you don't understand the whole context, where does the question come from? How can you answer a question you don't even know what is going on? What is the problem? Where do I come from in order to take a certain position in that regard? So on the practical level, we have an obligation, literally an obligation, the same as when you see somebody drowning, you see a little kid running across the street when the cars are coming, you have a moral obligation to try and save them. And if that applies to the physical survival of the child, how much more so to the spiritual one? There's not only physical charity, that you give a check, that you give money. There's also spiritual charity, that you worry to give them their spiritual needs that they need and that they crave for. And deep down, every Jew really wants to be a good Jew. But they simply don't know any better. So yes, we have to do something. But to say, as came up in the last question, that the girl was upset that the rabbi didn't marry her. Why should she be upset? What does she expect the rabbi to do? Is the rabbi supposed to be an actor? Perform a religious ceremony for something which violates everything that religion stands for? Isn't that absurd? Recite the blessing, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, God, our God, King of the universe, Asher kiddushonu b'mitzvosov, who has sanctified us with His commandments, and then do something which violates His commandments? How blasphemous can you get? It's going to make her happy? It's going to salvage her relationship with the rabbi? At what price? What kind of a relationship? Where is truth? Where is honesty? Where is integrity? Would you ask anybody else to violate everything that they believe in, everything they stand for, just to keep you happy? This is outrageous. It's the very personification of everything that is immoral, hypocritical. She has no right to be upset. And for that rabbi, the other rabbi, to come up with some kind of a compromise on what? Who are you to compromise things which are not yours? You are a trustee. You are supposed to be a teacher. You are supposed to be a guide. He should have sat down and explained to her what the situation is. He should have enlightened her that she should sense and understand. And you don't have to be too intelligent to be able to understand a basic moral question of integrity. Then you're going to salvage it? Salvage what? Salvage for whom? What is going to be the end result of that? Where are you going to draw the line? Anything just to keep the people happy. Give me their placebos. This, ladies and gentlemen, Judaism calls idolatry, not religion. Idolatry means to worship anything aside of God. And that is the ultimate idolatry, self-worship. This has nothing to do with Judaism, nothing to do with Torah, nothing to do with Jewish continuity, nothing to do with Jewish self-preservation, nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with truth, nothing to do with morality, nothing to do with anything. It's plain, simply nothing. Jews for nothing. And that is where the crux of the problem lies. We are looking for nice, beautiful band-aids that look nice, have nice pictures on them, and may smell nice, and we put it on a festering wound and think, by putting on these band-aids, you have solved the problem. I now no longer see it. They come to Shul on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, or for that matter every Yom Tov, for that matter every Shabbat, for that matter every day. They have a Seder. Big deal. What does the Seder mean to them? To talk about Jewish self-sacrifice in Egypt, taking the idol of Egypt and sacrificing that, and that is the merit by virtue of which we came out of Egypt, and then bringing in an idol into the Jewish home and an idol of society at large to be amenable. This is not what it's about. It's putting on a band-aid. The wound is there. No problem has been solved. You have only magnified the problem tenfold and 20-fold for the next generation. You have pushed it off a little bit. Okay, it's up to them.